So I'm Antoine. I'm from France. Online, you can find me as Soyuka. I've been doing lots of JavaScript, PHP, recently a bit more Rust. And I'm contributing on GitHub since 2011, I think. And since 3 or 4 years, 3 years, I'm contributing onto API platform and working now in this company, this French company called Les Tilleuls. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram by using a 0 in place of the O. So, performance. It's an act of presenting a play, concert, or other form of entertainment. This is the look on your faces right now. What is he talking about? Aren't we here to talk about computers? Yes, indeed we are, but in fact, performance is like, as spectator, we judges the performance of the computer. And when we talk about a computer, Arnold Allen told this phrase, like, the word performance in computer performance means the same thing that performance means in other contexts. That is, it means how well is the computer doing the work it is supposed to. So yeah, computer performance. It's the amount of useful work accomplished by a computer system. And actually, if we go back in history and take the central processing unit, the CPU of our computer, we can actually measure performance as a mathematical thing. And this is the formula: performance equals I times F divided by N. So what is I is the average instruction per cycles. F is the clock frequency in cycles per seconds. And N is the number of instructions to be executed. So, yeah, I guess you feel like Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting, but let's take another look at this word performance, naming time. Time is objective because you can measure time. You know, we have seconds, we have minutes, we have hours, okay? But it's also pretty subjective. Picture that you're in a traffic jam and 1 minute can look like 1 hour, you know? And on the opposite side, an interesting talk, like the one from before, could be like 1 minute or 10 minutes, but it was actually 1 hour. And this brings me to this quote: "How long is forever," said Alice. And the rabbit said, "Sometimes just 1 second." So now to perceived performance. There are many studies that have been done on the subject, and what these studies bring out as a kind of conclusion is that kind of graph. So I have to credit this Radibit guy. I've stolen this graph from him. And if we take a look at the first gauge, it's like instant. It's between 0.1 and 0.2 seconds. It's really an acceptable response time. It's almost instantly, you know? The second one is between 0.5 to 1 second. It's an immediate behavior. Usually it's the response when you ask me a question, I respond in that time. And then we have the user flow. So this starts to be like between 2 seconds and 5 seconds. It's an optimal experience. I mean, it's not perfect, but you can accept this, you know? You will still be focused after 3 or 4 seconds. But you could be easily distracted. And the last one is 5 to 10 seconds, where at the end, if we don't give you something to attract your mind, you will totally lose focus, or your mind will go to something else. So yeah, be careful when using time as an objective measure, and always think about that small rabbit. So let's get back a bit in history. This is a central processing unit, and this is also a central processing unit. Now, if I show you these two pictures without adding any information, you can say that the left one is more performant than the right one, okay? Now, if I say to you, yeah, but the one from the left is actually the first Intel processor commercialized in 1971. And the second one is an Intel Pentium 4, commercialized from the year 2000. And I give you some numbers in hertz. Now that you have these measures, you can compare them, and you know for a fact that indeed the processor on the right is way more performant than the processor on the left. All this to say, to measure performance, you have to compare things, okay? And it's also like measuring an improvement from one state to another. This is called performance improvement, okay? So we're here to talk about programming and developing and coding. So let's actually code. And we will apply all these performance things to the development process. To do so, I have this use case. I don't know if you remember in the year 2000, like when MySpace came out, this service called Delicious was a service to, it was some kind of social network where you could save your bookmarks and share them with others. So I want to do this application, and I will do it as a single page application while using API platform. And the main thing about this app is that it will take a screenshot of the bookmark you want to, and it will do some metadata scrapping, okay? So to start a project, usually when I use PHP, I just use Composer, create project, Symfony select, and bookmarks. After this, I just require some components. Here, I'm going to use API, which gathered together API platform, doctrine, and many small things. I'm going to use that make component, which is a Symfony command to help you code less, actually, and some debugging components. When I'm done with this, all I will do is console make entity. I name my entity bookmark, I mark this class as an API platform resource, and give a bunch of fields, link, title, etc. When that's done, this command creates me this class as a bookmark. It's annotated with the API resource annotation, which means it will come out in the API as a CRUD resource, and it's also an entity, a doctrine entity, and it can be persisted in my database using doctrine. So I'm going to augment this a bit, and I want to change this annotation and use a new route that I call create that will be on the that will be used with a post method. And what I want to do is I say, okay, my bookmark is really full of fields, but when I actually save a link when I bookmark, I'm only using a link. So I will use this bookmark input class. And this bookmark input class actually just looked like this. Just a simple class with one field, the link. Now, I'm doing a console server run, and API platform magic happens. You have your bookmark here. Snoop Dogg is really happy about it, and we have get post, get delete and put resource routes. So now my app doesn't take any screenshots, it doesn't scrap any metadata. So here, Breed Dragons, I'm going to show you my service that does all these things. So it's a service. I use a bunch of dependencies inside it. In my constructor, I just specified this screenshot directory, and I have this function invoke where all the magic happens. So it's normal that the code is cut on the right. It's just to give you some idea of what it's doing. So first, it will persist my bookmark when I got it. It will just create an entity, a doctrine entity. Then we have this crawling process where I will get the metadata of my page. I'm using Panther to do this. This is a new Symfony component that's used to crawl pages or do unit tests, end-to-end tests, for example. So you can see I've checked for the title in the page, I've checked for a description, and I searched for an OG image, which is a new meta tag. And then, last but not least, I'm going to take a screenshot and do some image resizing, because I've noticed that Panther actually took the scroll bar with my screenshot, and I don't want this. So this is heavy job, you know. And at the end, I just persist my entity, and it's saved in my database. We're done. Okay, my application is done. I've done all the work I wanted. I've took a screenshot. I've scrapped metadata. I've saved my bookmark in my database. So let's give the app a try, okay? So to do this, I'm going to use this Swagger UI interface, and I'm going to use my create route that I've configured earlier. And all I send is a link, but behind it, the bookmark is way complicated with metadata and screenshots. Now look at the time on the bottom right. It's quite long, right? We are past this, this user attention. Like, you can't wait for like 13 seconds for this to come. But finally, we got our result. But yeah, way too long, way too long. We need to improve this. So my first thought was, okay, let's add some asynchronous job processing using, for example, Mercure, which is a new project that so you can check the link if you want more details. But basically, there is a hub in the middle, and it will use I've lost the word, event sourcing to push data to your clients. And I will also use this Symfony component that came out recently, which is called Messenger. And this gives the ability to process data in an asynchronous manner while still using PHP. So we're using some RabbitMQ queues where we push the data inside, and then it's treated asynchronously. So in PHP, Composer requires Mercure and Messenger, and API platform is of course compatible with these. So all I did here is add the Mercure flag on the top, so the second line, and at the last line, in the create operation that I've configured, I've just said, okay, Messenger equals input. This says that my bookmark input from before will be sent to the Messenger instead of being processed synchronously. And I'm saying status equals 202 because when the user sends the request to bookmark the link, I want 202 accepted response to be given. You have to add a little bit of configuration if you want this to go through a RabbitMQ service. And I'm going back to my service where I was doing all this metadata scrapping and screenshot taking, etc. And I'm going to down the two last line. You can see that I'm persisting already when I got the link. And when I'm scrapping metadata, I will also persist. And when I take my screenshot, I will also persist. So let's take a look with a video how this looks like. So when we send the link, there is a post made with my link, and instantly a response is given. And then the message is given to DaffyDoc on the bottom, which can be represented, for example, by my service running asynchronously in another process, okay? And each time it persists, Mercure will send updates back to the client using event sourcing and update my client as it goes. So the waiting time, it's the same. We are still at 13 seconds for the whole processing, but from a user point of view, it will be way faster. Actually, it's not 13 seconds anymore, it's just 132 milliseconds. So you see what I've done here is I've not really, I've just played a bit with perception, and it's still a performance improvement of some kind. This is, yeah, an example where I had multiple bookmarks, and you can see you didn't feel like you waited 13 seconds. So yeah, this is awesome. But now, let's test all the things, because testing is important in an application, you know? Like, without tests, it can break down. It's like, it's not working. And to do so, in PHP, we have multiple ways of doing, for example, functional tests. You can use bhat, you could use Postman in case of an API, or even PHP unit. And my choice today will be oriented to PHP unit. Why? Because first, I don't really like bhat. The Gherkin format is way too verbose for me. And it's been there for years. It actually works perfectly. And you can do unit tests with it, but you can also do functional tests. So this is a typical unit test. It's really verbose, like you don't even want to read this, but you have to write it. But yeah, you're using prophecies to simulate the services. We're not going into this detail. And instead, we are going to do some functional tests. And with Symfony, you just have to use this kernel test case. I'm sorry about backslashes. They got away from the namespace. And in the setup function, I'm starting my kernel. So this is the Symfony kernel. And I will be able to get, for example, the entity manager of Doctrine. Now, I'm going to test my service, my bookmark persister I showed you before. And to do so, note that on the fourth line, I'm using a local service, because if I send this to my CI, I don't want this to be using an external service that I don't know if it will be awaken or not, or maybe get a 4-4. And what I do is just invoke my service, pass it the entity manager and the screenshot directory, invoke my class, and then just check that indeed my title matches what I want. Then I've written my test, just going to launch it. I have to count to 10 to lose your attention. I'm just kidding. Yeah, it took again 13 seconds, which is way, way too long. I can't wait that long when I'm using unit tests. You know, it's not possible. So I was like, wait, why is it so long? Like, I need to find out. And for this, I used Blackfire. I used Blackfire to make a profile of my unit test, actually. And to do so, you need to require this PHP extension, the Blackfire extension, and they recommend you to use a group also so that you could run only Blackfire tests and run unit tests in an opposite way, like alone. Then I've just set up some classes. This is using the Blackfire SDK, so it's available in the documentation. And I set a title. I'm really recommending you to set titles on your Blackfire profiles and say bookmark persister panther 0.3. So this is the exact same test as before, but I've wrapped it between the create probe and the end probe. And what this gives me is a graph of what was going on when the process got executed. So here you could see I'm in the invoke function, and I went down, and I can see there's a sleep. There's a sleep that takes 8% of my time, and file get contents taking 80% of my time. But I've not used file get contents, I've not used sleep, I'm just scrapping metadata and taking a screenshot. What's going wrong? So I've dig a bit into these, and I'll find out that indeed it was Panther that I was using that was slowing the process. And Grégoire Pinault, which is a French developer, working also on Symfony, also noticed this, and actually said, wait, there's a problem. Panther is using file get contents, and it's so slow. And actually, with the last version of Symfony, we have now an HTTP client which uses CURL or curl, if you want, and it's way, way faster. So I was like, oh, this is beautiful. I'm going to try this. So how do you try a GitHub pull request like this? You simply go to your composer.json and you say, okay, Symfony Panther, I want the branch. So you can note on the top, he named the branch Cheetah. So I'm going to use his branch, and I'm also configuring a repository in the composer.json, and I say, okay, for Panther, you're going to use the Grégoire Pinault lyrics repository. Composer update, then I run my test again, and it went instantly. And my Blackfire profile is actually quite different. Like, there's the invoke function. You remember before we had like 2 graphs because the main process in this function was sleep and file get content. Now I can see everything. I can see that I'm going to start this video again. I can see on the right side that I have image PNG because indeed I've resized my screenshot. So this took time, but this is the time I want to see actually in my graph. And I can see indeed at the end that we used curl to get the page. Blackfire also allows you to make a delta between these 2 profiles adjusted, so the one from before and the one with the Cheetah branch. And you can see that I've won like 11 seconds, which is a lot, really a lot. So if you want to check these both profiles, they are available at these URLs, so bit.ly, Blackfire Panther vs Blackfire Cheetah. And you will see it's quite interesting that you can zoom in and really know where the time has been consumed. And you can also note where the memory has been consumed, or the CPU. And actually, with Blackfire, you can also do some assertions, which is quite nice, because now I know that my whole processing should take less than 10 seconds. So I can actually say, wait, give me an assertion here, and give me that the whole processing should take less than 10 seconds. Again, think about the rabbit, yeah? Don't forget the rabbit, because I can put 10 seconds here, because I know it should never be more than that. but I cannot really put 3 seconds or 2 seconds. It won't mean anything. It won't have sense. And also, what I did is say, okay, you remember in my bookmark processing, I was like, when I got the bookmark, I'm persisting in doctrine and flushing. And when I got the metadata, I'm also flushing. And when I got the screenshot, I'm also flushing to notify Mercure so that the Daffy Duck notifies the client. And this is why I added this assertion on top and said, okay, I know I have 3 flushes. I don't need any more. So if I have 4 flushes, for example, or 2, there is a problem. Some junior came in my code and did something wrong, you know? So this is really good and allows me into my unit test to add these metrics and to give me a warning when I run them to say, okay, wait, there is a regression, for example, with Panther. It took more than 10 seconds, or indeed we had not the right flush count. So now API testing. In API platform, we will soon have this integrated unit tests ability, and you will just be able to add to extend this API test case, and using the Symfony HTTP client, you will be able to make a post request on your API directly from PHP unit. So note on the bottom, I've checked that the status code is indeed 202, for example. And this also allows me to do a profile, a Blackfire profile, but this time on the request. This is not my bookmark persister service anymore. This is only the request. And remember, at first, my request was taking 13 seconds. But now that I've improved everything in the perception for the user, I can say, okay, now this request will obviously take less than 1 second. It's doing nothing. The request is just sending the link and giving back a response. So if it takes more than 1 second, we are not in the same perception grade from the graph I've showed you before. So something is wrong. And I also know that when I'm doing this request, I'm sending a message through RabbitMQ. So I can say, okay, note that there is a metric and there should be a message that went out. And obviously, because I just sent the link and the link went to my Daffy Duck from before, there are no queries here. There are no SQL queries. So I've said, yeah, the count must be null. And then again, I can launch the same test by adding this Blackfire in between. Oops. And yeah, and this runs, and this will give me warnings if something went wrong. Now, this was just to show you a bit how this could work. Also, they are providing some test case tray that you can use in your tests. And with this, you just have to say this asset Blackfire and run your code to profile in there, instead of using start probe and end probe. So yeah, Blackfire goes way further. It can do also API testing by itself. Like you can define scenarios and run them in a CI. You can also have custom metrics. For example, if you're not using Doctrine, you're using MongoDB, for example, and you could add your own metrics and said, okay, I want to plug here and to plug here. It's also integrating very, very well with multiple tools. So I've talked about Postman before. Blackfire integrates with Postman. And I advise you to find this book, if you can. It was written by Fabien Potencier. And it's explaining multiple things about performance, PHP, and how Blackfire can help you in your day-to-day process. So remember the rabbit. Remember the rabbit. Choose your metrics carefully. Like you can't use some things that won't be like application related or business related. You know, like it was like this. For example, I've chosen to measure that I have 3 flushes because I have 3 flushes, but I'm not checking that. I don't know, I'm making a count SQL query because there is no point to do so. Measure and compare. If I had only measured the first time at 13 seconds and stopped there, there was no point in using, in measuring performance if I don't compare. So this brings me back to the car that was evolving at the at the start of this talk. Don't bet too much on time also. Because, you know, so I've showed my presentations to some friend, and he said to me, yeah, but, you know, like at work, I have a slow computer, and when I run my tests on the CI, it goes way faster. And yes, this is true. This is a perfect example where time is not objective, finally, because you can say time will be always less than 0.2 seconds. Because yeah, if your neighbor has like thousands of Docker services, his computer will be slower. His CPU, so the formula we had before to calculate the performance in a mathematical manner, would be not the same. Because yeah, his computer is slower. So be careful with time. When you think performance, think also green computing. But because yeah, if you improve performance, you improve the time the requests will take, for example, and obviously you will consume less energy, so it will be greener. And my last small thing, but this is more a personal thing, use PHP unit, like use PHP. If you want to use Behat, you can use Behat, but if you have the same solution by using PHP, why not? It's really powerful. It allows you to do whatever you want. It's PHP after all. So this is the only limit is your mind when using PHP or PHP unit. I wanted to thank my company, obviously, because they allowed me to work a bit on this. Blackfire for sponsoring this talk, and the Istanbul PHPKonf, especially Emir, that had some trouble organizing everything. Really want to thank him. Now, if you have questions, I'm all ears, so please have questions. No questions? No. This was too easy. Actually, when you're using Blackfire, you have indeed to, when you're doing assertion, what it does is first he sends a request to the Blackfire service to say, okay, I'm going to profile and I want these assertions to be. Then he runs the code. Then at the end, he will gather metrics, send them back to Blackfire on the same ID, and then Blackfire will send a response to your terminal, for example, and say, okay, the metric was all right or not. So no, it won't work. Another question? In production, you mean? It's okay. So the question was for everyone, can I run Blackfire in production to compute metrics, right? Yes, you can. I don't think you should do this on every request, for example, because it would slow a bit your application. Or maybe you could do this. There must be some solution, but it's like when you use Xdebug with PHP, for example, it's an extension. We advise you to disable it in production because it slows down PHP, and Blackfire will slow down PHP. I think it's better to use it in a CI. And of course, if you want to collect metrics only, it works, and it will just launch a request at the end of the execution and say, okay, these are the metrics, but it will slow down a bit the process. So maybe do this once every 10 requests or something like this, you know. I don't know what's happening. One, two. Whoa. This present is for the best question. Okay. Are there any other questions? No question? Okay. I'm going to say the guy who wanted to know if it works offline. Because this was the easiest question. Oh, you already have an airplane, man. Give it to him then with the production question. Thank you really much for your attention. Think about the rabbit and Alice.